tonight for Talking Art and the second artist panel of the 27th annual Eastside Culture Crawl. As Jody mentioned, tonight we're talking about art breaking barriers, three artists expanding boundaries with paint, and featuring the artists on your screen, Mike Alexander, Laurie M. Landry, and Niki Singleton. My name is Kate MacDonald, and this is my 10th year as a Culture Crawl artist working out of the Hamilton Bank Building. I'm also a painter and co-curator of moving art with the Eastside's Art Society, artistic and executive director, Esther Rosenberg. Now, please let me introduce you to tonight's artists. Mike Alexander is an Anishinaabe visual artist and writer, originally from Swan Lake First Nation in Treaty 1 territory, who grew up in Winnipeg. He paints primarily in acrylic on canvas to draw light to the work of decolonization and justice. He is best known for his Ojibwe woodlands art style, for which he apprenticed under Anishinaabe master artist Mark Anthony Jacobson. He has held artist residencies across British Columbia and exhibited countrywide. He most recently at the Bill Reid Gallery. He is currently an artist in residence at Squatchay Lodge. Next up, because we're going alphabetically, we have Laurie M. Landry. She is a capital D deaf Canadian contemporary artist working out of the Sunwa building. She is known for her paintings of hands, which focus on nonverbal communication. She has taken part in artist residencies across Canada, exhibited throughout BC, and curated a show featuring figurative works by contemporary female artists. She holds a certificate in fine arts techniques from Emily Carr University and has been the recipient of grants from BC Arts Council and Canada Council for the Arts. Her work has been featured in publications such as American Art Collector and Create magazine. And finally, we have Niki Singleton, who is a painter, illustrator, and sculptor working out of Studio 580 on Clark Drive. She has undertaken a number of international residencies, and her work has been shown at the Brooklyn Museum, the Whitney Biennial, Chelsea Art Museum, White Box Gallery, and Betty Campbell Gallery in New York City, where she studied and lived for 10 years. She holds an MFA from the New York Studio School and is represented by Arts Fair Gallery in Paris. So, thanks to all of you for coming here this evening and talking about your art with me. I've spent some time over the past few days looking at your art online and reading a little bit about you and your work. And it occurred to me that you each have been impacted by social forces, and I'd like to explore, just to start, how you believe that has informed your art practice today. So if we keep going alphabetically, we'll start with Mike. What do you think?
Great question, and thank you for hosting and being very kind with your words. So I grew up in Winnipeg, which can be a really tough place to be if you're Ojibwe. We are the largest concentration of Indigenous people in the province, and I guess the country as well, which means that from a pretty young age, we learn about systematic racism and often at the hands of people in a uniform, but not necessarily just people in uniform. It could be your next door neighbor. It could be a person at the bank. It could be your healthcare practitioner. It comes from all angles because of the systematic nature of it. And so for me, art has become a way to kind of process some of that in a healthy way, I'd say, to examine the world as I see it, which, words are nice, but for me, I sort of find that the whole story becomes a little bit more clear if I'm able to sort of articulate it through painting.
Amazing. Laurie, how do you feel? Are you ready to talk a little bit on the same question about how social forces have informed your art practice to date?
Okay. Um, I think I think someone told me that I should be exploring what it means to be deaf, you know, because that's a subject that I know the best, you know. So, but before I started doing that, I was doing landscapes, still life, just basically technical, building technical skills. But then I went to a residency in Wales, and a mentor, Lisa Milroy, she told me to think about what it's like to be deaf and try to incorporate that into my painting. So that was the advice that I took. And over the COVID period, how everything was so accessible for us because everything was online. You could get interpreters for everything that's online, and it was just that good. It was really amazing to think about it. So so I think those experiences, and I thought, what, we're part of a society, we're part of humanity, and I decided to say, I'm painting people like me, I'm painting people, that have a disability, because we're here, and we're gonna be in the face. Yeah. So yeah.
I think that's wonderful. I don't think you're only painting yourself, though. Those are some beautiful hands. So I think you paint for all of us with your work and show us oftentimes just how much gesture is in even the way a still hand falls on a lap, for example. And it's interesting to me that you talk about COVID being an amazing time and a benefit for you because of everything being accessible online. And I hope that one of the benefits of that has been things like these Zoom conversations. And what's really interesting to me is we had a video artist last night, well, who's also a painter, talk about what a benefit COVID was for her, not because she was kept inside and alone, but because, the internet made so many things possible for her.
Yeah.
Niki, I don't know. I don't know if you want to tell us about COVID while you answer the first question, but I'm sure you got a lot to say. So,
Well, I think that I've always made drawings. Started off as a drawer more than a painter, I think, when I was a kid, and it's always been kind of from a political standpoint. I think probably because I've probably always felt different my whole life. My parents were immigrants to Canada, so I was an immigrant child. And my mom was is Greek from Africa, so that's very different. And then I was different as a child, I didn't know why but discovered later on that's because I'm queer, so I'm a queer artist. And so I think I remember one of the drawings that's sticking out in my head is a drawing of a woman with chains pulling her arms and legs from each side, and a baby like kind of pushing out of her body, and her being locked in this position. So, and that was when I was pretty young. So I think I've always felt, I think if you feel repression, and thank you, it's so wonderful to be on this panel with you wonderful artists. You can understand what it feels like to a degree of what everyone feels like if they're undergoing repression, right? So I think it's probably all my imagery stems from there. And COVID was fantastic because yeah, I think a lot of artists liked it because we just had that period of time to focus on our work, and we had no other pressures around us taking us away from it, and no pressure to have to make money also. That's the thing that is always sort of torturing us from afar, right? Because we really want to be focused on making things. But yeah, so it was wonderful. Despite, I think a lot of paintings, I made a lot of paintings, and a lot came out of that time about, the suffering that was happening. But, as a way to deal with it, I think, just as Mike said, I kind of use it in the same way, I think, artwork.
So that kind of brings up another question I've kind of been mulling over when you talk about money. And I'm not going to mention barriers, as we don't have to focus on suffering tonight. I really want to celebrate all of your art and the way you keep pushing through and coming back and meeting so many challenges, because there are an incredible number of barriers to being an artist, to the art world. And money is really one of them. It's expensive. It's expensive to start out. Your materials are expensive. Studio space is insanely expensive. And on top of all of that, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of artists all vying for attention alongside you. So what does keep you coming back? What keeps you painting and pushing past those experiences? Somebody hop in.
Okay. I think what keeps bringing me back is, well, first of all, there's just a need to express. It's a necessity. If you don't, you go a little insane, and it's not really good for the rest of society. So I think it's different in the studio. I went to the New York Studio School, and they taught studio practice above everything else. So you do have, the ideal is to go to the studio every day, to show up no matter what's going on, and push through what's going on in your life, in the world, whatever it is that's difficult. Which is, there are things that make that hard, but I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel like if I'm angry about something, it's so much easier to make work, to just go in the studio and make work, because that emotion is just so pure, I think. And it can, nothing else is happening in your head, so you don't have to push those things away. Not necessarily that it makes the best art, but because, it's always surprising what happens, I find, in the studio, no matter what emotion is going on. It's just always surprising. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I know I read a quote from Mike earlier today, and I think he said that to you, Mike, that art and that painting is 110% spiritual. Is that what you said? Is that kind of the same idea for you?
I mean, it's really become something that I've come to understand over the years. Like at first glance, you might look at an Ojibwe painting and see, some animals and some nature, and done in a X-ray sort of two-dimensional, colorful style, which is pretty to look at. And I've read, criticisms of it being, really primitive or what have you. And I can't disagree anymore with that sort of a thought, just sort of because, like in our culture, storytellers are viewed as, really special people. Not everyone gets to be the person that tells the stories of, the Ojibwe people for our own, next generations, but with the public at large. And I think that that person needs to be of clear mind and healthy, sort of healthy, enough to be able to do so in a good way. Excuse me, I'm drinking some bubbly here, and it's very sparkly. And so, what I've come to learn about it is that it's a necessity for me in order to reconnect with my culture, right? Um, some people will reclaim their culture by learning the language or by becoming heavily involved in ceremony or that sort of thing. For me, um, it's the expression of my culture through the practice of painting that brings me back every day, because I need this for myself. It's important to balance the commercial sort of reality of doing this for a living, but there is no commercial reality unless I'm taking care of myself, and unless I'm bringing that positive energy or that really righteous, indignant, angry energy, as was just noted, to the canvas, and to take all the emotional sort of life that I have, and to really just sort of take the chance, and to take the risk, and to know that it might be a terrible year for selling paintings, but I've never been more clear mind. I've never been able to have a better understanding of why I'm here. Art sort of is at the core of that.
Wow. Laurie, can you top that answer? I'm pretty sure you can come close, just based on your earlier.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah, I kind of agree with what both of them have said. One was, you come into the studio every day, even if you're not in the mood to be in the studio. It's like, today was a beautiful day, after a couple of days of rain, and I did not want to go to the studio, because my studio is in the basement, so there's no windows. So kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to go for a walk and then go to the studio, and that's probably one of the things that we need to do. Is to do some self-care, like take care of ourselves, because if we don't take care of ourselves, how can we produce? How can we, be inspired to create if we don't take care of ourselves? So yeah. And then for the for ideas and everything, I think when I was growing up, I was mainstream. I learned how to speak. I never really used sign language for a long time, and so in the past few years, I started to reconnect with the deaf community. So yeah, so there's that reconnection involved as well. And the more I reconnect, the more I'm inspired, because I meet so many incredible deaf individuals that are so inspiring, And it's like, how can I not share my stories?
Mhm.
Yeah.
and you tell your stories through your paintings and through the gestures of other people's hands, I guess, in the case of your work. Is that correct?
So yes, yeah, the portraits that I did, um, I have them make the um favorite phrases. So, for example, if you go down to Nikki, the one, yeah, her, Nikki, due to deaf Indigenous person that lived in Victoria, and when I went to Victoria to work in the studio, and she came to the studio, and we did I've never met her before, but it was kind of funny though, because it turned out that um like my family is from the Caribou, around Wells and Cornell area, and her family from Williams Lake, you know, and so we talked about the Caribou a lot, so there's that connection there. It was fun. And anyways, her favorite word was confidence, and that's what she's signing, confidence. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, if you can see the interpreter signing the word confidence, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I need some of that.
yeah, yeah.
Confidence is a beautiful thing. And I think it shows up in all of the work of every one of you here, uh, pushing past, uh, working through, finding joy in a pandemic, or, or, or some version of joy. Um, where do I want to go with that? I guess I guess the important thing about art is that it crosses cultural barriers and that the language of visual art is different than the written or spoken word maybe, and that's how we all find a common place as people from different backgrounds and cultures and walks of life. And I don't know how that resonates with you, Laurie, or if it resonates with you.
Yeah, 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 it does resonate. Um, yeah, it does resonate with me. Thinking too much at it. Yeah, yeah, that's okay. Sorry, that's my
Oh,
cat.
you have a beautiful cat.
Okay, bring down. Um, yeah, yeah, it kind of resonates because I think everybody got a story. Yeah, and no sign language is a very visual um um language, and it's very and it incorporates a lot of movement, gestures and movement, and that's so difficult to capture in a 2D flat dimensional painting. So it's always been a challenge. It's always been challenging, and I think I really enjoy trying to find the solution to it. How to best express it, yeah.
Mike,
Thinking,
what about you? Do you think do you think that visual art can be a language that um, kind of crosses all boundaries?
I hope so. I think that I'm trying to get there. I think when I look back at the body of work that I've completed over the last few years, I kind of see a language emerging from it that I kind of rely on now. But I mean, even with so my my work is generally broken up into two sort of areas. One is the really traditional woodland stuff, and I also kind of appreciate and I'm probably motivated by some of the abstract impressionists um, who have taught me a little bit about how to interpret a painting kind of thing and how that might or might not work. And You know, one of my most recent pieces that I think might be able to be shared is called Starlight Tour. And when that was completed, you know, a friend of mine was like, why isn't that police car on fire? Like, and you know, my impulse is, yeah, absolutely, it should be on fire. What a great idea. But I don't think that that really captures kind of what I wanted out of the piece. It doesn't sort of like that would be. I think that there's a language that's a little bit more thought out, I guess, than just sort of any sort of impulsive kind of response to injustice. You know, I think it takes time to sort of sit with one's feelings. It takes time to sort of come to terms with the world, and art, for me at least, offers, you know, an opportunity to present that to a viewer, to sort of say like, well, what do you see? You know, what I can tell you what this is about, but what do you see? And I think that kind of that language is sort of between the viewer and the artist, I guess, somewhere, hopefully to be found. But if not, then I guess hopefully it's still a nice painting. But yeah, I think there needs to be, and over time, I hope that I can learn that language, as well as these two lovely folks have, whose work I'm just totally like really happy to see, and it's really like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? This is for people that are really established and really great at what they do. It's really inspiring to sort of see these works.
Well, that is a beautiful painting. Maybe Jody can put it back up on the screen for us for just another minute, because I know what it's about, but I'm not sure I would have read what it was about when you painted it. I may have read something close to it, but I think maybe the audience would benefit from knowing what a starlight tour is and what this depicts.
Yeah, it's um, in Winnipeg in the 90s, 90s and into the 2000s, but especially in like Saskatoon, we were hearing stories about, you know, predominantly Native men, who were being driven out, you know, who were allegedly intoxicated or causing a disturbance or something like that, who were picked up by the police and driven out to the outskirts of town, in winter, where they would be dumped by the police, clothed or not clothed, depending on who it was, and they would be left to make their way back to town if they could. And some of them did, and some of them were able to find a payphone on the way, but some of them didn't. And some of them, like Neil Stonechild, would die of hypothermia, as would be sort of learned by an inquiry into, you know, his death in particular. But that was, you know, those relationships between Indigenous people and the police, are, you know, really harrowing, for me back then, when I was sort of like, you know, would be I'd be stopped by the police because I looked like someone that they were looking for, but you know, which is really weird and frightening, I guess. You know, we didn't feel safe. So after all these years, you know, I sort of feel like I I can't seem to forget, you know, and I certainly don't want to forget about Neil Stonechild and the Starlight Tours, as they were called. Um, and so now to be able to find find it in where I get to tell his story, for me is really important. It's part of what I'm leaving behind for my children and for their children, and so on and so forth, that we don't forget, you know, what's happened and who's responsible for what's happened.
So, and you don't have to put the work back up again for me, Jody. So looking at that and hearing that, and seeing that the work is a diptych, that it's two canvases, I think that creates a real tension within the whole composition. I don't know if that was purposeful or not, and it really shows, I think, the two sides, because you have the moon and, you know, the night. Of course, there's still highway there, and then the other side, of course, we have the institution of, you know, the police. But it also it makes me question. So when you did that, was there a space constraint? Is that why you chose to do a diptych, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned how to make my own canvases, and so I will do like 4 feet by 8 foot canvases kind of thing. I think I was just I'd finished up a workshop on making canvases with some of the residents here, so I was kind of like, oh, I'm just gonna grab a couple of these, and because I got this thing I got to do, kind of. It was an immediate sort of thing, and I knew exactly what it looked like before, you know, I started. There was no sketching, you know, beforehand in this case. So it was very evident to me from the beginning that it needed to be that size in order to sort of capture the impact that I had in mind for it.
So, space constraints. I'm going to take that back to Niki and her escape from New York. I think that kind of flows flows into a little bit of your story of space constraints, if you want to speak to that a little bit. And also, sorry, because I cut you off from the last question as well. I see, because you're a surreal painter.
Pretty much, yeah.
Is it
Get surreal.
are you using a personal language of symbol, or is it more just an outpouring of emotion when you paint? So there's two questions there. You can answer them in whichever order you like.
Okay. Yeah. Well, oh geez. I'm still thinking about the police painting, actually, because I think it's a fabulous painting. It's a really powerful one. And I think what's interesting about it is the fact that it wasn't on fire makes it more interesting for me, because I know that impulse to light it on fire. But I think the fact that you can leave it up to interpretation is so much more interesting for me now, I feel, with my work, how people are reacting to it and the stories they bring to the work itself. I mean, you know, a police car riding off into the distance, it's there's so many references there that you can make, and, you know, you can relate to. Like, there's a combination of fear and, you know, like an intrepidation of, well, is this person coming to help me or kill me? You know, like there's that dichotomy happening there. And so in terms of symbolism, I mean, that's such a strong symbol in itself. I think with what I am slowly making an kind of alphabet of symbols, I think, that each mean different things to me. And I've always been really connected to Egypt and Egyptology and hieroglyphics and the goddesses and gods and things and ancient history. And so it's like lately, it's almost like thinking about it as alphabetic language. But, you know, it might only be evident to me. I don't know, or maybe not. I think that it is evident to me, but you know, a lot of the artists and my teachers in New York, they always reacted like, no, it's really direct, Nick. Like, we know what you're talking about here. So, yeah, I mean, if there's a piece in particular, maybe we could talk about that one. Okay, yeah. So this one, this is a coming out story. It's made up, but it's a combination of the people I've met in my life and come across and my own experience. It is a male character. Well, you know, male, female, doesn't really matter. But it's almost kind of like a celebration of the strength of a queer person to make that choice to come out and say what they are and live it in what can be a very violent environment around them. But most queer people that I've met are quite, okay, it's a generalization, but quite gentle. So the lion behind is a kind of almost like a familiar of this person who's like resting and just yeah, a gentle, beautiful lion. And just, I think at this point, what I'm doing with the artwork is just embellishing in a very kind of like celebratory queer way, like, you're fabulous, you're out, and no matter what comes at you, you're that strong that you can take it, you know. And I think that that's evident with the hands coming in on the side and sort of pulling him in which direction they're gonna go. You know, it's like, are you gonna take it? Are you not? Do you like it? Do you not? There's, you know, a lot of sort of like bondage, I think, in the queer world also. So it's that dichotomy of, oh, is that a good thing, a bad thing? Where is that coming from? Is that coming from your repression, from a family background where you weren't treated well? You know, what is that? And can we find a way for that to be healthy? Yeah, so I'd say that's that. And of course the tongue sticking out is like
I
pretty
love
obvious.
the time. I love the time. That kind of leads me into this question I've been formulating a little bit as we talk. And I kind of want to preface it by saying, I want to believe that the arts community is more open than other facets of society. But I also know that when competition is as fierce for limited resources and gallery wall space and sales opportunities, that it becomes a lot easier to elbow someone just as or even more deserving out of the way. So I wonder if the three of you, if each of you have an idea about what could be done that would make our community more inclusive, despite those challenges, if anything. I promise I'll have an easy question.
Yeah, I think it does at the top, really. So, you know, whoever's the curator, whoever's you know, like who makes the decision. I think they need to be more open and look beyond what they already know. You know, like by that I mean they know who the favorites are. They know, you know, they have a close favorite, but but they need to go beyond that, look, they, how can I make this more accessible for an artist with a disability, or or, or a POC artist, or a queer artist, because right now, even though a lot of progress has been made, with it's the predominant white male, but that's changing. That's changing. We're seeing a lot more indigenous work. We're seeing a lot more Black artists work. We're seeing a lot more queer artists, and we're seeing more deaf and disabled artists, But but my experience is that it's smaller galleries that are willing to reach out. The bigger galleries, I don't know, it's harder. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I can just, I think, speak for queer artists more, but I think that they've been held back from the art world, in New York anyway, for quite a few years. It's only recently, and there's been some galleries that have been championing them, like one or two, really. But and a lot of artists have not come out to the art world, let's say, even if they've come out in their own life. They haven't sort of labeled themselves as that, even if their work is quite obviously dealing with, queer issues, because they wouldn't be shown. Yeah, and luckily that is changing, like Laurie says. Yeah, I see a lot of difference in the last 5 years, even just after Trump. I think that, that was such a horror show that I think the whole world, well, especially North America, was like, okay, no, we got to stop messing around here and really make ourselves heard, right? If you're part of a minority.
So before I bring this question to you, Mike, I'm just going to ask Niki, also tough question to add on to that. Is it because it's easier to hide queerness rather than race or disability that has not only kept queer artists from coming out, but also maybe, and it's not their responsibility at all. This is not what I mean by that question, but is that maybe one of the things that's delayed openness and accessibility for all artists, possibly, if we're all putting on this mask and pretending we're, normal and worthy and white, obviously. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I think that, there are so many artists that are queer, like not just visual artists, of all disciplines. So, it's almost been like a dirty little secret that we won't actually talk about who they really are, but we like their art, so we'll support them in this way or that way. But I think if you're dealing with like queer issues in a direct way, yeah, they weren't given the same opportunities. Well, any opportunities. I think if you're very obviously queer, then you had no chance. It really depends on how obvious you are in terms of queerness. And I think, yes, you can probably hide to a degree. Society's changed so much also, with the fact that, there's a lot of straight people that look queer now. So that's changed also. But yeah, it isn't like, an obvious, like it's a thing that you could probably, that's a hard one, because some people can hide it and some people can't. Whereas if you're a person of color, you can't hide it. It's right. So yeah, you're talking about I don't know, are we talking about like severity of repression, or it's
No,
difficult.
I don't think we're talking about the severity. I'm just kind of interested in what
that-
we could do better. And
Yeah.
I wonder, Mike, I'm sure you have a different answer, you know, other than Laurie and Niki. So,
Add to
oh,
that, what Niki was just saying about queerness. I identify as a queer person, but I grew up in the 80s, and that was when the AIDS was further down. And I saw how people were treated. I saw how people were discriminated. I saw how and people that are close to you making homophobic remarks. At the time, I mean, like right now, they're not homophobic or anything, but that was the time then. So that's when I decided that I'm going to stay in the closet. Yeah. And over the years, the closet has become very comfortable. And it's like, I'm queer, but I'm not going to make queerness the main subject of my artwork. So I think it's different for it's different for everybody. Like, for me, I don't really identify sexuality as part of my artwork. It's just part of my personal life. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, I totally understand that story because I grew up in the 80s also. And I didn't deal with queer issues for much of my career. I didn't recognize that I was, in a way. But now I'm dealing with it directly. And it took a long time to get to that point, I think, to be able to do it. Yeah.
okay, let's get to Mike.
So
We got 2 minutes left. I want to hear what Mike's got to say about this because I bet he's got some ideas.
I feel like a lot of this is out of my control. I think that the gallery system, the limited amount of it that I know about, it's totally out of my hands. And it sort of feels like I can kick and scream all that I want, and that will probably go also unnoticed, um, or totally dismissed, I guess. And so that kind of leaves me back to my own devices. Well, what do I do about the reality that there's only so much space in a gallery, and there's so many of us creatives out there kind of with the same thing in mind, which is exposure or what have you, or career, I guess. And I'm, I'm a I'm a recovering cynic in my life. I've spent a lot of time, really sort of thinking in a negative way, and embracing hopelessness and nihilism, and just really defeatism ultimately, which never served me, no matter how hard I embraced it. So I guess what's left for me at this point is to really just sort of trust the process, to trust myself that, when I show up, it's 110%, like whether it be to, my studio, or whether it be, when I'm have to throw myself out the door and mingle with people, which may not be the easiest part of my day.
Talk on
But
Zoom.
it's it's important to do it. It's important to make those connections and to sort of trust in the process that if I'm being honest with myself, and I'm told that that's going to sort of show in the work. I don't really have a gauge for seeing that, but I'm told that it's important to sort of like just kind of to do your best, and if people feel for it, they'll see it, and they're in that way as well. That's out of my hands, right? So I guess that makes me a little bit naive, probably uncool. I don't know, but I just don't have any other ideas. I don't. I've tried kicking down so many doors in my life. I'm not sure that that's the best. way to do this. I think that there's room for more. I think that the gallery system needs to try harder, for sure. And a lot of us are waiting, and that's that.
Okay, well, I promised you guys all an easy question as we got closer to the end. We got 7 minutes left. I don't see any questions coming in. Kind of trying to ask everybody this year as we do these artist panels. Mike, any happy accidents that have really kind of pushed your work forward? I mean, there's showing up and there's giving it 110%, but sometimes there's just that, strange lightning bolt where you hit the wrong color on your brush and made something even more incredible.
Gosh, that's not an easy question.
No,
I kind of live in a world where like I commonly don't know what day it is, which I think is terrifying to some people. But for me, in the same way that I enjoyed COVID, I also sort of delight in not really knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. Um, Something really cool could happen in the studio. I might get an email from someone. Um, I might sort of talk with someone else that could just sort of like be of you know important consequence. I met someone at a artisan market like a year and a half ago, had a half-hour conversation about JMW Turner, and found myself at their place in London, um, doing a tour of art galleries in London, because of that conversation. I didn't expect that. Who knows what the hell is going to happen next? It's an incredible life, and I think every day sort of has the potential to have that moment of magic that kind of happens, and that's kind of how it goes.
I was going to
If you
use the
want it.
word magic, so that makes me very happy. Laurie, happy accidents, magic, what you got for us?
wow. I've been classically trained in painting, so you can see that in my representation of painting. And so I don't think I really make any room for happy accidents. Yeah. Maybe I might have made say a breath stroke. It happens in the moment, so maybe I make a breath stroke that somehow work, even though that wasn't my intention. Yeah. Or maybe missing the colors and not getting it right. But you know that good. Just put it on. Yeah. Yeah. And it will.
Showing up is half the magic, so at least half the magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nikki, you've got some magical pieces. Happy accidents?
Yeah, well, I think I have happy accidents quite a lot actually, because I try to keep while I'm working, I try to keep myself open. The less control, the better. So I often work very abstractly. I work abstractly in the beginning with color and mark making, and then the narrative and the characters and symbols and things come in like nearer to the end, to tell you the truth. So a lot of the times I'm reacting to what's been put down. And yeah, happy accents are fantastic. Yeah, I love them.
So I'm going to close it up here. I'm going to remind everybody that Eastside Culture Crawl is November 16th to 19th. And I hope that everybody listening tonight is going to visit these artists at their studios. So if you want to start west, you can start at Laurie's studio in the Sunwa building. And then you could keep going down Pender Street to see Mike at Squatche's Lodge. And then keep going east and you will find Niki on Clark Drive at Studio 580. So thank you all for coming out this evening, and I hope you had as much fun as I did because I really love speaking to all of you.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
you.
Thank you so
It's been a
much.
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Bye.